Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. Welcome to the Gridiron Nation online for another week, and it's actually a game week. You are not mistaken. It's not a misprint. There will be a game on a Saturday, and Ohio State will be involved. Jerod Smalley, Coach Bill Conley here with you for the next, 20, 25 minutes or so. If you get more questions, we'll keep going, whatever it is. But we're here to talk about not only the Buckeye game this weekend with Maryland, but the news we got last night, very late, about Ohio State being the #1 team right now in the college football playoff rankings. And the best thing you can say about that, well, there's two things you can say, really. First of all, they've never been #1 before, so you can celebrate that. And number two,
don't get excited.
Doesn't matter. Do not get excited.
All excited.
We've seen it. It's the thing you have to re-educate everybody every year because you understand it. It's an exciting time, but you also have to understand it is an ever-changing system we're talking about here with resumes that change, committee members change their opinions. You know, it's a moving target.
Yeah, the criteria they've set is supposed to be figured out mathematically, but it's funny how those things change as the year goes on. But whatever happens, one thing for sure, after this next week, we probably won't be #1, at least for a week or two, because of the big game, of course, with Alabama and LSU. But the good news is then we get Penn State and Michigan. If we take care of business, then we're in great shape to finish to that #1 spot.
Undoubtedly true. You win those games, you win all your games, you're going to be in the playoff. It doesn't matter.
Right.
So it's a funny thing about, you look at Clemson last night. The defending champions are #5 in the first poll. And Clemson fans are outraged. And you also know nobody's in a better position than Clemson to be in the playoff.
Exactly, because of their schedule.
Right. It's just going to be, it's not a layup, but it's just easier for them. So where you are probably watching us right now is on NBC4's Facebook page and also on NBC4i.com. And the easiest way for you to get a question in to Coach Conley, question or comment about the Ohio State season, you simply go to the comments tab under the live video there. You put your question or comment right there. I'll read it right here live, and we'll get Coach Conley's comments on your question or your thought today about the Ohio State season, the game coming up, and the college football playoff that will unfold here in just a few weeks from now. So, Bill, let's talk about this. Buckeyes on a bye week. Last week, getting rest. Justin Fields said he needed that rest because he got banged up against Wisconsin, took some pretty good shots to his back. He said the other day he's feeling better. Overall, what kind of team do you expect to see show up on Saturday?
Well, you have to say the same team we've seen all year. You look at around the nation, any team at all, who has been more consistent than Ohio State? Both sides of the football, lopsided wins every week, never really a game in doubt going into the second half. So, we expect nothing different. I do think the second bye was a little better for us in relation to getting guys healed up because it gets more physical as we finish the year, as we know, at the November schedule.
Maryland is in the shoe Saturday. They're going to be a 44-point underdog. And, Bill, here's the weirdest thing. In the first 2 games of the season, Maryland scored 142 points.
Right.
They scored 79 in one game.
Yep.
Since then, in the 7 games combined, they've played 9 games. In the 7 games since those first 2, they've scored 124 combined. Yeah. It has been a night and day difference. What's going on with Maryland?
And they beat only one team, Rutgers.
That's right.
If you want to call it a team, they beat them. First of all, the issues. They have 3 main issues on this football team at Maryland. Number 1 is the quarterback situation. They've been hurt. They can't get inconsistency there at all. They're one of the last teams in the conference in relation to all the vital statistics related to throwing the football. The second thing, they've got 2 freshman defensive backs, and people have been taking advantage of that. Third thing, their offensive line, they got a couple young tackles, have had trouble protecting the quarterback when the healthy ones are in there to throw the ball. Yeah. So those are the issues. But the ironic thing is they still got some really great skilled players. I mean, they got guys last year. McFarland last year, he had an 80-yard run, a 75-yard run. 2 receivers had over 50-yard plays. So they've got the potential of breaking big plays. Last year in the game, 1,200 yards in that game, total offense. But we gave up 51 points. That's almost as many as we gave all year combined.
That's right.
So it's a different Ohio State team, a different Maryland team in a lot of ways.
Yeah, McFarland, the running back last year, went for 298. That's the second biggest rushing day against Ohio State ever as a school. Remarkable day, and Ohio State still won the game somehow. It was a rather miraculous moment. We're going to get to your questions and comments right now. Again, if you have questions or comments for Coach Conley, you can put them right in the comments tab here as you're watching us on Facebook Live today on NBC4's Facebook page. The first couple questions, Coach, not surprising, about Penn State. By the way, we just learned the Penn State game will be a couple weeks from now, November 23rd. That is now going to officially be a noon kickoff. We kind of knew that was coming all along, but with the Fox big noon package they put together, they want their biggest game at noon. It has done well for them. When they had Ohio State, Wisconsin, they had huge ratings, biggest game of the weekend by far. So they're cool with noon games, and you're going to get a noon game for Ohio State, Penn State in a few weeks. First question from Bradley. What do you think the keys are to beating Penn State? What could give Ohio State problems in that game?
First of all, stay healthy the next 2 weeks, help out. First of all, we've got to take advantage of some of their youth on their football team. So, their defense is playing really well, but I think they've yet to really be tested, a team like Ohio State, running and throwing the football. And we got to get after their quarterback on offense. Now, he's been having a great year for a young first-year starter. So if we do those two things, we could be fine. And I think it's one of those teams. I'm not big on home-away deal, but that game I am. I think we are always better at home against Penn State than on the road.
Because you're always playing the whiteout over there, and it's madness.
That's exactly
They always play better than they are, and they're already good. So when you beat them in the whiteout scenario, you know you've played really well.
That's right.
You had to play really well. That's a great point. A lot of folks who have chimed in here this afternoon have said, well, is Penn State overrated? I don't know that we know the answer to that yet. I think you're going to find out more about them Saturday when they play at an undefeated Minnesota team who maybe doesn't wow you over with incredible five-star talent, but they've looked really good, Bill. I can't imagine Penn State will not be challenged here Saturday.
Exactly. I mean, Minnesota wants to prove they're for real. And Penn State wants to prove this is their season. And, right now we look at these rankings, they're what, fourth now?
Right.
They came out in the ranking. So one of them's going to walk away with a loss. But Penn State, I think, has to really prove they can beat an undefeated team in Minnesota, and then, of course, beat us. It's a tough job to do. But, we'll see. I think they're the big surprise, I think, not only just in the Big Ten, but in the country in relation to the football program that really was expected to be kind of, average to good to be maybe great team.
Yeah.
Could be a great football team at Penn State.
And their head coach, P.J. Fleck, made a whole bunch of money this week because of the start they've had. We'll get into that in a little bit, too. Here we go. Let's talk about another comment here. And this is a question you and I have talked about off air a couple times. You have seen so many Ohio State teams, Bill. And Steven asks, he says, this is the best team I've seen in years, both on offense and defense. And I'm wondering, Bill, again, you've got 8 games of work. You don't have the whole body of work yet, but as you evaluate 8 games of this season, is this the best complete team you've seen?
Yeah, I think it is because of the one factor, depth. More depth than I've ever seen. Not at the quarterback spot, but nobody has that anymore. We talk about offensive and defensive. Name me a weak position. There is no weak position. We had plenty of things to criticize last year, even though we were winning games, but we could talk about the defense, talk about the linebackers, et cetera. I'll tell you what, this year's team, they're performing at a high level every week. I see no weaknesses. Without a doubt, there's more depth on this Buckeye team than I have ever seen.
Yep. Tina and John are both yelling at us. They say you could jinx Ohio State by skipping over Maryland. That's not our job. That's football team's job. We can talk about whatever we want. It's free country. They can talk about nothing, and it's a free country to them, too. So that's not our gig. We're talking about the season at large and what all can unfold here. And, Bill, a big part of that is what will unfold this weekend. The 2 huge games this weekend opposite each other, both with unbeaten opponents. Penn State, Minnesota. We talked about that a second ago. And LSU and Alabama in a massive game in Tuscaloosa, 1-2 by the Associated Press and coaches polls. So let's get into those 2 games, Bill, a little bit, because they will direct Ohio State's path a little bit here down the line.
Absolutely.
What do you expect from Bama LSU? Who do you think comes out on top?
I'm going to go with LSU because if you look, Joe Burrow is nationally at the top of most of the major statistically of quarterbacks in the country. He's played well every week. He's one of the top guys they're talking about for the Heisman. Being that it's at Alabama, though, that's going to take away about 7 points I would think they would have. So I'm thinking a narrow victory by LSU in Tuscaloosa, but maybe 7 points or less. Okay,
and they're a 6-point underdog going into that game. So that'd be quite a turnaround from what the Vegas experts think. Let's talk about the other one. Penn State on the road in Minnesota, where I was checking on the weather the other day. It actually will be moderately okay in that it will be around 30 degrees and it will probably be snowing during the afternoon. So that's manageable, probably. It's not like 4 degrees. I've been to Minneapolis when it's been 4 degrees. So let's talk about that. How do you think Penn State handles that? Who comes out on top there?
Yeah, when the last actually time I was there, it was about 4 degrees, but we played inside.
Yeah.
But this one's outside now. But, you know, I think Minnesota has more to prove that they've really turned the corner than Penn State. Penn State's got the tradition. They've got the skilled athletes that are proven, especially this year. And Minnesota, I think, has to prove they're really a top contender right now. So I'm going to go with Penn State. And I think by a couple touchdowns.
Wow, you think so?
Yeah.
You think so? What gives you that? Because of their defense?
Well, if it's that cold, PJ Fleck can't row the boat. Can't do that.
Right. You can't get the oar through the ice.
Absolutely.
You have to keep chopping at it. I get what you're saying there. Les asks the question, will the Buckeyes be a blackout game against Penn State? They already had a blackout earlier this year, so I would say that's a no. You're probably going to see the regular uniforms for that game, but that is a good question. They did a blackout for a Penn State game a few years ago. So
it'll be a knockout.
It'll be, well, potentially so.
One way or the other.
We'll find out. Somebody's going to have a hard time in that game. Again, if you got a question or comment for Coach Conley, put it in the comments tab below our video box here on Facebook Live. We'll get it to Coach Conley here before the end of our show this afternoon. Coach, let's talk a little bit more about what we learned from Ohio State in their most recent game. And we've had a long time to talk about Wisconsin and what we learned there, especially in that second half, though, where they put the gas down, right? They got that punt blocked early, gave great field position in Wisconsin. They get in the end zone, and from then on, it was Katie bar the door. It was a lethal performance offensively and defensively. What did you learn about Ohio State that day?
Well, I learned, first of all, you can play 4 quarters. Mm-hmm. We had to play a little longer than normal. And we had to go up against the nation's best defense and still move the ball, especially rushing on the ground, and also scoring points against a team that didn't give up many points. Mm-hmm. So, and again, it goes to this whole theme, I guess you'd say. We're a complete football team, and it really showed. A couple of things happened we hadn't seen. Possibly some good returns for the years out. And some of those young players like Garrett Wilson that are just now getting their feet wet, starting to play pretty good. Yeah,
Garrett had a real nice return in that game, and it did give you an inkling as we get later in the year. If you need an explosive special teams play, he might be your best hope because he's got that innate gene, that natural element of him to go out and make special plays, and he's got incredible hands too. So in terms of safety with the football and handling the ball from that unique, it's not hard to field. It's easy to drop a punt. You know what I mean? When
Absolutely.
You're back there, that is a hard thing to do, to manage that thing, especially blowing in the air. And he's one of those guys that can do a great job of that.
Woody Hayes always said, playing for Woody, he said the punt returner is the most courageous man on the football team. You got all these guys screaming down to tackle. You've got to catch the football, and you don't want to, even if you have to fair catch it, that's not an easy thing to do, especially if the wind's blowing. And again, you got the enemy warriors coming out, breathing fire. It's not easy. And he showed, and you were right, it's more instinctive. It doesn't have to be your fastest athlete, a guy like Wilson's really fast. It doesn't have to be your best receiver even, but catching the football and the way the punt comes down is a unique talent.
Yeah, it's hard to track that football, and he's very good at it, no doubt, especially early in his career. Again, questions or comments for Coach Conley, put them in the comments tab below on the NBC4 Facebook page, and we'll get you an answer as quickly as we can here on the air. Chuck's asking about a scarlet out. I'm guessing he means for Penn State. Every game should be a scarlet out.
Normally is.
So there's probably no issue there. Of course, every time it rains, it turns into a poncho out. That doesn't matter. Whatever blue, orange, yellow poncho everybody brought.
So they make a lot of money on those things.
Yeah, somebody definitely is. So here we go. Let's talk a little bit more, Bill, about what to expect in this Maryland game on Saturday. Ryan Day was asked the other day about the fact that no matter what the plan is or no matter what develops in the game, he has to play guys. He has to get his starters on the field. And yes, there's going to be an inherent risk of injury. That comes with playing the sport. But he feels that his guys need reps. They haven't played a lot of football over the last month, you think about it. They need reps. And so you get the sense that if this one gets out of hand, they may not pull those guys right away because he wants them to get repetitions.
Absolutely. And Maryland, enough of a test. They got enough athletes to really test us. Mm-hmm. First of all, rushing the football. They're like 6th in the Big Ten or something like that, rushing the football. But now it's 100 yards less than what we rush the football. But we'll get a test, and that's where their big plays have been coming from the last couple of years, is running the football, not necessarily throwing the football all the time. They make big plays both ways. Mm-hmm. Rushing the football is where they had their biggest gains. And so we've got to stop a good running attack. And that's what Maryland wants to do. They want to control the clock. They want to keep the ball, not let it in the hands of the Buckeyes. So we've got to really force the punt. Third down is going to be huge. We got to force them into third and medium to third and long to stop drives.
And the best news for Ohio State, they're the best team in the country on third down when you consider offense and defense. They're tops in the country in third down conversions. I think they're third in the country in defensive stops on third down. They're as good a third down team as you'll find in America. So to your point, that's a heavy strength in Ohio State's favor when you talk about the critical nature of a third down in a game. Hard to top what they've done so far.
Yeah, you're not going to find us toward the top of the nation in kicking field goals. We don't have to. We've been scoring and drives and big plays.
Yeah, nearly 50% this year.
Exactly. Touchdowns. And in the red zone, we've been phenomenal. So, keep putting it in the end zone, and we should be fine.
I think it's going to be really interesting, Bill, to see, testing that theory, right? It's one thing to say it in a press conference, but when you're up, let's say they get up big, kind of like what Michigan did last week to them, where they got up big in the first half. You have to make that decision as coach. You've got depth concerns at quarterback. How long do you leave him in the game? When you've, in your coaching career, had depth concerns at a specific position, how heavily did that weigh on you mentally when you go to make a plan for a game and when the score starts to dictate your decision making? How did you always try to balance that? What's best for the team, what's best for the player?
Well, as a coach and a coaching staff, you talk about that ahead of time. This is the plan. But see, coaches control it not only by just if they're in or not, but what plays do you call when they are in? And you can call some plays which are a little bit safer if you have a little bit of a cushion and things like that. But don't believe they're not talking about it. Now, you don't say it to players; they don't want to know that type of thing. And but I guarantee you, they're talking about it. They know the key is, keep sharp the next 2 weeks, keeping sharp, winning games, and being full tilt physically the last 2 games.
Yeah, that's the idea. And they've had some health concerns on both sides of the ball. It's not just been, making sure Justin Fields is okay. Defensively, they have never really been fully healthy at defensive end. That's the scariest sentence you can say about Ohio State because they've been so dominant there. And not just because of what Chase Young's done. I mean, they've been really strong across the board up front. But the fact that Jonathan Cooper hasn't really had a healthy run and they had to sit back out again a couple weeks ago, when he can get right, if that happens this year, and it may happen, you're talking about a 5-star talent opposite a 5-star talent at defensive end. And my argument is that we have never seen them, despite classifying them healthy and playing in the game, we have never seen them full speed.
Yeah, but here's the thing. When we saw this against Wisconsin, we saw that when teams try to double team a guy like Chase Young, it really opens things up for the other guys. Whether it's a linebacker blitzing or the 2 interior tackles, I thought played really good for the Buckeyes, and they actually collapsed the pocket into the lap of the Wisconsin quarterback several times.
Again, if you have a question or comment, put it in the comments tab here on NBC4's Facebook page. We'll get it to Coach here in the last few minutes here before we wrap things up here this afternoon. Coach, if you had to pick a most improved player or a player who did the most for themselves this year so far, maybe from an NFL perspective, something like that, who would be the guy that stands out to you?
Well, I think the guy that we saw Chase Young develop last year, and we saw, man, this guy, he looks the part, he plays the part. We expect him to be good, and he played really, really even above those expectations. But the one guy who was just kind of being talked about as an average guy, average is not the right term, but a good back, not a great back, is J.K. I mean, here's a guy that has made himself far and above the best running back in the Big Ten. Dobbins has really had a great year. He's proved that he can make the big play as well as being consistent, makes good cuts, and gets better, I think, as the season goes on. Now he's one of the top 5 national leaders rushing the football. Yeah,
I'm going to give you 2 guys on defense. I want to get your reaction to it. I think the fact that Davon Hamilton has been in the backfield as much as he has been a dominant figure in jamming up the run as he has all year. I think he's done more for himself this year than any other player in terms of the steps that he took from junior to senior year. I think he's had a remarkable senior year so far, and I think maybe his best football is still in front of him. Damon Arnett also, because remember, he almost went to the NFL and had this change of heart. He met Jeff Hafley and became committed to the craft. And suddenly he's a guy, remember we were talking about guys that, maybe can go to the pros and might make a team scenario. He might be a high draft pick now because of that decision to come back.
Absolutely. It would be shocking if he's not a first-round draft pick. But Hamilton, those are the stories right there coaches love. You take that guy who's who's been a plugger. You know, he works hard, there when he's supposed to be all the time, watches a lot of film, really has got better and better, and then his senior year really comes on and has an outstanding year. Yeah. I think that's a good pick there.
Yeah, the two outstanding players, and you could even go further than that. You can look at the offensive line, the bounce back Brandon Bowen put together this year, coming back from injury. You can go a long way across the board, but
you know it's a good year when you have trouble picking out guys.
That's a great point. It's like
look on the defensive side of the ball too. You know, the whole secondary as a group has played much better than a year ago. I think a lot of that hats off to the coaching staff. Yeah. Obviously, we're playing defenses that can help them be successful.
Well, you think coming off a bye week, this will not be an issue for Ohio State in terms of focus and putting energy forward and trying to put this team away as quickly as they can and make a statement. They don't have to make statements, but make a statement to themselves. Come out and play the type of football they've played all year, Bill. So I don't think that's necessarily a big talking point about this game. Coming off a bye week, you'd expect them to play hard and play well. What's a key to playing well, though? What's the other thing that you think might be critical? You mentioned a third down performance is very critical in this game. What's another element that Ohio State has to achieve Saturday?
Well, I think the one thing that we have to do is we have to make sure that we still run the ball against them, because we're one of the leading teams in the nation running the football. And we're averaging nearly 300 yards a game rushing. And when you do that, you put a lot of pressure on the secondary to come up and give run support. And then when that happens, you can hit the deep ball on them.
Sure.
So I think continually running the football makes you a dangerous football team.
You know, what's interesting about this is that Maryland comes into this game really struggling against the pass. And that's an interesting point, because you wonder if you look at them on tape and say, boy, they really give up some numbers through the air, if coaches aren't tempted to try to hit them through the air and maybe throw a pass on first down that they ordinarily wouldn't, because they know what the defense is susceptible to, rather than committing to the thing you know that you do, and that's your identity. That's a good point. I wonder if they'll balance or have to balance that on Saturday.
Yeah, and we talked about the similar type thing going against Wisconsin. We knew they were really good against the rush, but we were able to run the ball anyway. And the strength of Maryland's defense is on their front. They got senior front, and then they got some good linebackers, a former Buckeyes.
Yeah, Keandre
Jones. Yeah. And so, you know, if you can run it against the meat of their defense, obviously that makes their whole defensive unit vulnerable to the pass.
Certainly does. So that's what we're looking at for Saturday, Bill. Let's take a big picture look, though, as we mentioned a second ago, college football playoff. You look across the Big Ten this week, and some of the games are going to shape out here. I'm looking at two games in particular. Let's talk about Wisconsin and Iowa, Bill, because the loser of that game is out of the Big Ten West. There's no way they could make it back with 3 conference losses. So you talk about critical, high-pressure games in the league. Right. Sure, Penn State, Minnesota, that's one. There's 2 others I got my eye on. This is one, Bill, because Wisconsin at home, pressure's on.
Well, you'll obviously tell a lot about the makeup of the Wisconsin football team, who suffered 2 bad losses for them. You know, the team was there. Some media analysts were talking about as one of the top 5 teams in the country. Well, that ain't the case. Yeah. We know that now. They've lost 2 bad games for them. And can they take on a tough Iowa team? At home, they should be able to handle it. But Iowa will not roll over and die.
No. The weird thing about Wisconsin is you look at them on paper, and the resume is amazing. #1 ranked defense in the country, perhaps the best running back in the country by many analysts' thoughts. A quarterback who can throw it, has shown he can throw it in games. Obviously, he didn't throw it very well in Columbus, but he had moments. That's a team by the resume you look at and say, maybe they should have been a top 5, top 10 team. But upon closer inspection, and as you watch the tape, you see maybe there's more issues there than we thought. I'm surprised up front with all Big Ten caliber linemen they've got. They've got a lineman projected to be a first-round pick this year, and yet they didn't dominate up front.
Yeah, and they proved to be a team that has not been able to finish games. They have not been a 4-quarter team. Look what happened at Illinois. They should have won that game. We dominated them. So, you know, they're a team that can beat anybody on a given day, but also they're a team that can be beat on a given day.
Sure can. Let's take one more game here, Bill, before we get out of here. Michigan State at home. They're 4-4 this year. They got Illinois. Illinois won 3 in a row. They're feeling really good about things. Things are not very good in East Lansing right now. What's your thought about that game and the potential residuals of what could happen if things don't go very well for Michigan State?
Yeah, Mark D'Antonio, who's a great guy and a great coach, he's probably not going in before daylight. He's going at nighttime. You know, he's sneaking into that office because there's a lot of pressure on him. I guarantee if he loses to Illinois at home, then the bags are halfway packed already.
That's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah.
You consider how much he's done there, how many Big Ten titles he's won. But I think there was a stubbornness, if we're being really honest about this, with not changing his offensive staff this offseason. They've had so many struggles there, and we know many of those. Jim Bowman, obviously, has been in that play calling role, an offensive coordinator role for Michigan State. They just didn't evolve, Bill. They just didn't evolve to an offense that would really challenge and stretch a defense, and we've seen it time and again. Despite having some talented players and some draftable players, some NFL, I think they've recruited pretty well, but boy, it just hasn't materialized on the field. And Saturday's a scary one because we saw Illinois when they played Wisconsin. They can physically match up with people.
Absolutely. The problem that really I think they really haven't had a quarterback that could take them over the top offensively. That's one of the problems they've had. But the pressure's on Mark because of this. The administration for 2 years now back-to-back has pressured him to make changes, and he has refused. Now, he's shuffled some people around, given different assignments, really hadn't made any major changes. And, there's going to be a lot of pressure on him to finish well, not just in the game against Illinois, but the rest of the season.
Sure. Like rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic scenario.
Yeah, still going down.
Gives you something to do, but you're still going down. We'll keep our eyes on those games this weekend because there's a lot at stake there, I think, not only for the Ohio State fan, the casual Big Ten fan, but on the college football playoff scene, as you're evaluating the path forward there. These next 2 weeks are going to be very interesting for Ohio State. You're going to be watching a lot of people on that 23rd of November when Penn State comes here. We'll have a very clear picture of what has to happen, and the clearest picture is you win your games and you're in.
Yeah, we're at the point now. We just got to keep doing what we've been doing. Don't stumble at all, and don't let any team live for 4 quarters.
Right. Critical. Simple. But easier said than done.
Easier said than this.
That'll do it here for the Gridiron Nation Online this afternoon. Thanks so much for joining us this afternoon. We'll see you back here next Wednesday, 2 o'clock online, NBC4i.com, and the NBC4 Facebook page. We'll give you a wrap-up of Maryland and a look ahead to Rutgers. Woo! Buckle up. It's going to be crazy out there. We'll see you all next week.